You did.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So
You're back.
how? Okay. So
So now we're on item 7.
About
Item
5
7.
minutes.
Yeah.
For about 5 minutes.
Item 7.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Not yet. We're just going to do an ad lib quickly. Yeah. We have like 5 minutes or so. Item 7. Yes.
Pardon? No, I'm good. Thanks.
And
Yeah,
then
it's, I think the plaster will magnify.
it's Shitla Mariso.
Priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the midterm strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you are still watching Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. We've just taken a look at the budget vote process insert and its importance for the country's development. And I believe most of the issues reflected in that insert and many others will find expression in the debates that we are building up to, both in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces taking place today at 2 p.m. Sibulelo, what is your reflection or your expectations in terms of the debate, particularly looking at the significance of the budget and policy implementation in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
You know, Shitla Marisa, I think it's important to also just, before as in me answering the question, to just contextualize to our viewers so that they understand that this process is not taking place in a vacuum. It's not an isolated process undertaken by Parliament. The process started in February of 2021, when the President of the Republic at the SONA, at the State of the Nation, tabled government's program of action. And that process was then followed by the minister's budget speech, where the minister also outlined the fiscal framework. He also tabled the division of revenue as well as the appropriations bill, which is the process that Parliament now undertakes to appropriate money, to allocate money to fund the implementation of government's program of action. So where we are right now in relation to processing the budget, and of course, importantly, Parliament's budget vote, it's really about making sure that all of the three spheres of government, but particularly Parliament as one of the three arms of state, has got the funds to ensure that it conducts oversight over the work of the executive.
Indeed, and that's what we have lined up here today. We do have very interesting interviews lined up this afternoon, and I believe most of the issues will find reflection or rather expression in those interviews. And we'll be talking to presiding officers as well, who would be giving insight and also giving us a hint as to what they will be discussing in the respective houses as the budget vote is being discussed. There are a lot of issues that usually come up when
Absolutely.
Budget vote are being discussed, like issues of oversight protocols that are put in place by Parliament. So that question often comes a lot in terms of the oversight machinery that Parliament has in terms of making sure that monies that are budgeted for are spent correctly. Your reflection?
And it is a very important consideration, particularly within the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a far-reaching impact, not only on South Africa's economy, but the global community as large is impacted upon on what is happening currently in the world. We're grappling with economic challenges. We're grappling with social challenges as well. The health system as well is under threat globally as well. But obviously, where we are right now in relation to the budget vote and this critical instrument, it is about appropriating equitably to each and every department or every entity that has a role to play to ensure that the country moves forward, that we get into that space of economic recovery and inclusive growth.
True. And we are looking forward to those discussions. And I believe improvements that can be made in terms of intergovernmental fiscal systems and how they can be improved to make sure that they ensure implementations will be looked at as well in the debates this afternoon.
Indeed, Shihlamaruso. Bearing in mind that the budget vote process seeks to ensure the appropriate allocation of resources to fund the implementation of the government's program of action, we will now take a quick glance at a clip of President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, where he outlined government's key priorities in the current financial year. Let's take a look. Okay. I need to come that side.
But it must be a year in which we rise as a people and we do things that are going to make us rise. This is no ordinary year. And this is no ordinary State of the Nation address.
I hope my mic is...
I will therefore focus this evening on the foremost overriding priorities that we have for 2021. They are not many, but they are focused. First, we must defeat the coronavirus pandemic. That is primary in everything that we have to do as a nation. And second, we must accelerate our economic recovery. Third, we must implement economic reforms to create sustainable jobs and drive inclusive growth. And finally, and not leaving many other things aside, but these are the key ones. And finally, we must fight corruption and strengthen the state that has been weakened.
This year marks 45 years since the June 1976 students' uprising, in which many children lost their lives while standing up against the cruel apartheid system, which imposed compulsory introduction of Afrikaans as a language of tuition. South Africa's Youth Month honors these brave and courageous youth who laid down their lives fighting for social justice, equality, and freedom. The month also recognizes the role of the youth of today in deepening our hard-won democracy, protecting freedoms attained, and advancing socio-economic transformation. As the national legislative authority, Parliament continues to ensure the government of the people under the Constitution by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues, passing legislation, and overseeing executive action to ensure that we accelerate change to radically better the quality of life of all South Africans, including the youth. As we commemorate Youth Day on 16 June, let us engage in deep reflection, dialogue, and action to bring about meaningful and long-lasting solutions to challenges facing our young population. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Of the country as well. And we know there's so many challenges also emanating from that space. There's also a perspective that in terms of development, the NDP, we have regressed a little bit. How important is the role of Parliament when it comes to advancing implementation, economic recovery, and getting us back to that footing of progressive development?
Thanks very much. I think what I need to do is just contextualize the fact that Vote 2 of Parliament exists within the whole fiscus of the country. I think the public understands that the Minister of Finance presents what I refer to very simply as the purse of the country. What is it that the country has in its pocket? And generally, that's also within the context of a depressed economy in South Africa, as well as in the world, exacerbated by COVID. So what then happens with the Vote 2, our parliamentary budget? It is meant to make sure that we meet the objectives as set out this parliament, which we refer to as the 6th term of office parliament. And in that way, what that allocation of monies should be, it has to be along how we exercise oversight on the executive. At the point of the State of Nation address, you derive thereout a program that has to be implemented and executed by the various departments. Therefore, the role of Parliament will be to exercise oversight. And why you asked the question, how do we get the economy, how do we get people employed? Effectively, the work of Parliament is to make sure that those policies creating jobs, reducing poverty, ensuring that we kickstart the economy, they exercise oversight onto those departments that have to deliver on whatever it is that they had put out there, whether it's the creation of a condition for investments to come back into the country. We should look at the legislations that are enabling that. We should look at whether ministers are actually executing their annual performance plan. So there's a whole process there. What do we need? We need budget that ensures that members of the various portfolio committees exercise oversight and ensure that there's accountability for every little cent that has been passed and endorsed and adopted by both the National Assembly and the Ncop.
Let's talk a little bit more about the mandate of Parliament, particularly in this current context of COVID-19. And obviously, we're not we're not out of the woods yet. There's also talks of a third wave, an imminent third wave.
Mm-hmm.
What is Parliament's mandate, particularly in the current context?
I guess it's clear in the Constitution. Parliament's mandate is to exercise oversight, ensure public participation, ensure that there's legislation that allows the public to be part of. So we pass legislation, exercise oversight, ensure public participation, that the communities are involved in it. And within the context of COVID, I'm sure a lot of us have seen the wastages and the statements and the evidence that's given at the Zondo Commission, and Parliament was also present there, presented by both the Speaker, the Chairperson, who are the executive authority. And the point was, to what extent does Parliament exercise oversight as part of its mandate? And exercising oversight means that you monitor the executive and make sure that they deliver on the promises. And those promises are informed by the NDP, they're informed by the medium-term strategic framework. They find expression in the annual performance plans that are presented by each department along each portfolio committee. So there's a whole process there, and that is oversight. All the step of the way it's oversight. Oversight to ensure alignment of the targets of the various departments, aligned to the strategy that is being adopted by that department, oversight on whether that key indicator or outcome is actually budgeted for, oversight on the fact that does the budget go to exactly what those departments say they will deliver. Simple. If there's need to refurbish or build schools, the education department will come in here, present that APP. Parliament should continuously be actually tracking that indeed budget went to where it was supposed to go. Why is it important, and why I mentioned the Zondo? The Zondo Commission indicated that indeed Parliament could have done better to monitor every little cent that goes out, having been approved and having been adopted and signed off by a parliament like NA and NCOP to a department, and make sure that that delivery is happening. The question is, has Parliament been able to effectively exercise oversight? Yes, it has. Could it have been better? Yes, it could have been better. And what then is the mandate? We as officials of Parliament, we do not remember, we don't do oversight. We are supposed to ensure that the members of Parliament deliver on their mandate. Public participation, that's also another mandate that sits in the Constitution. Members have to ensure that the public gets involved in informing them the extent to which all the plans as presented in Parliament have been fulfilled or are delayed, and there's a reason why. And public wants to know that. And if there is no communication, if there's no engagement between the public representatives and the citizens of the country, communities, that's where communities get disillusioned and decide that Parliament is not effective in its mandate, in executing oversight, in ensuring public participation. And then we end up having to explain. And I'm saying we because I'm an official that supports members. We have to explain to settings like the commissions and say, why did we fail? We failed, but did we really fail? Not exactly, could have done better. And in fact, this term of office, the Speaker and the Chair have reiterated, this term of office, they're going to try and really consolidate effective oversight, ensure that the public is involved in the public participation programs that we have to know what Parliament is doing and should be doing. You may ask, how is it going to happen in COVID?
You know, Madam Ethics Secretary, just reflecting a little bit more on the issues that were raised at the Zondo Commission. What undertakings, what systems have been put in place by Parliament to ensure that it does better? As you rightfully said, yes, Parliament has done oversight, but obviously there's always room for improvement as well. From an administrative perspective, we know that there's protocols or mechanisms or systems that have to be put in place to ensure that the administrative machinery is able to support the work of members of Parliament. What systems can you speak to right now from an administrative perspective to ensure that oversight is improved on?
Correct. That's a good question. If you look at the fact that we have like employees that up to 1,300 warm bodies that inform our compensation bill. The question is, how do we reposition ourselves and ensure that we strengthen the work that we've been doing? And I'm saying we as administrators, we need to make sure that the quality of our products, and I'm talking here research, analysis of annual performance plan, analysis of budget, legal services that we provide to members is up to scratch, empowers members to sharpen the questions they pose to the executive.
Absolutely.
We need to be sure that we are current and we build relationships with academics whose work is actually to do research. We need to be strategic in that way. We need to also sharpen, and something that we've introduced now, we've been doing surveys on levels of satisfaction of both members and external stakeholders. Yes, we have measured the levels of satisfaction in terms of the services we provide to members. We need to intensify that, and we have it now in our annual performance plan. And the way in which we can intensify it is make sure that we get feedback from members of parliament. I always say to my colleagues, we have 490 bosses. Each member of parliament must feel supported. We need not only to provide content, we need to have conducive spaces. Unfortunately, now with COVID, it moves on to the effectiveness of our technology in ensuring that members engage with each other, and they also can access information that empowers them to understand each one of the portfolios and see whether is the executive delivering against the annual performance plans and the plans they have actually put across. And to do that, it means we ourselves have to make sure that those portfolios are actually serviced better. We have talent, we have skills that are necessary to ensure that members actually derive a lot of benefit from the services we provide them and the content we provide them. And of course, creating a conducive environment, enabling mechanisms. We have already given our members laptops, iPads, and in fact, I'm quite happy as an acting accounting officer that the investment that we've made in ensuring that members have got tools of trade is generating a positive outcome, because now they're able to manipulate, they're able to use it, they're able to access information much easier. Yes, we have challenges of demographics of the country, not good bandwidth, disconnections here and there, but I must say that staff in parliament have actually risen to the occasion to intervene and make sure that members are given appropriate support. It still is not enough. There's lots of demands. There's diversity in the way in which our members consume information that we provide to them. But continuously, we have to sharpen it. And I can tell you now, the engagement and the strategic relationships that we must establish with institutions, because we can't employ 10 researchers for one portfolio committee or select committee. We can't. But we can have strategic MOUs with institutions of higher learning, with institutions that do research, and bring out that content there and bring it onto the fore for members to actually use. What do you need? We need an employee who is sophisticated, who knows where to get the resources if they do not have them, because we can't have it all and we can't employ everybody else.
Indeed.
That we need.
Indeed, Madam Acting Secretary, the issue around deeper insights and analysis, and obviously you've spoken to broadly all of the systems that you're currently putting in place. You're leading that process to ensure that the administrative protocols or all the necessary improvements within the machinery are put in place to improve the scope of oversight and the impact as well. Additionally to that, when we're talking about analysis and the expenditure of the budget, we know there's academics who have also said that it doesn't mean just simply because funds have been allocated to a particular department that will result in implementation. How does Parliament begin to also zone in on that space to ensure that over and above only looking, and we know that the PBO is there, the PBO obviously plays that role when it comes to the finance committees, but this is something obviously we're talking about expenditure throughout the year. what processes is Parliament putting in place under your leadership to ensure when it comes to budget analysis and also perhaps impact assessment, that all of those systems are being put in place so that that impact that the communities want to see, it actually takes place on the ground?
That's a challenging question. First and foremost, I think the Parliamentary Budget Office has got the skills to analyze budget. First. Secondly, Parliament has to use the Money Bills Act, Amendment Act, and related matters. Because what that act does, it allows Parliament to say, having analyzed the delivery and having scrutinized how budget was used by this particular department, it doesn't look like it went to where it's supposed to go. And then the discussion has to be Parliament saying, we then are going to divert or recommend that that percentage, whether it be 0.5% of that particular department that continuously has underspent or increased irregular expenditure, move that percentage, move it to another department, which is quite critical and catalytic in intervening and ensuring that there's reduction of poverty, or there's better roads, or there's better access to the markets. So that analysis, not just mathematical and statistical analysis, it is an analysis that says budget has been allocated. Has it actually served the purpose of reducing poverty? So that's at an impact level. Has it impacted on the lives of the people? It can only impact on the lives of the people if the people feel that their lives have changed. The Parliament Budget Office should then say, it appears that continuously there's an under expenditure or irregular expenditure, and supported by the Auditor General, it is evident that indeed this budget can be amended and moved to this other portfolio, which is in fact delivering on its output, its target, meeting its targets, if I were to put it correctly, meeting its targets, and actually making a difference in the lives of the people.
Madam Acting Secretary, has Parliament actually done that?
No, that's exactly the discussion amongst, if even I think the Speaker could even put it quite nicely, more articulate than I. It is not done. It's not being done. And if you look at research, there's, I don't know how many parliaments, there's fewer parliaments who do actually do that. I do know that engaging with the colleagues in Uganda, for instance, even the Speaker says, look, if a budget doesn't necessarily show me that as Parliament we can have effective oversight, I will not pass the budget of the country. So that act is actually a powerful, Money Bills Act is the most powerful act that Parliament has to use. And it can activate effective oversight. It can bring a bite onto ensuring that the executive feels that oversight is exercised on them.
Just to digress a little bit, when you are leading Parliament at a very historical time in history, this pandemic is hitting the global community. And for South Africa as a developing country, we know that many people have lost their jobs. What has been the experience for you having to pioneer and navigate, so to speak, this institution administratively to ensure that it still is able to perform and fulfill its constitutional mandate? What has been the experience during this historical time?
So that's been quite fascinating. I guess like everybody else, when lockdown happened in March 2020, which was quite a harsh one, that was level 5, I personally was quite nervous about how we're going to execute the operations of Parliament, because we're used to going out, supporting members to do oversight, supporting members to solicit unput on amendments of various acts, you know. And when that came to a stop, it was quite unnerving to say, then what? But I must really say, once it was declared that we are now coming back into business, fortunately, the period happened within the Easter period. So members were still in recess, but we had to think about what do we do next? And I want to give appreciation, express my sense of appreciation to the staff, that when the committees that were critical, it was decided that the committees that are critical to exercise oversight on the impact of lockdown And they looked at the committees like your health, I think social development, and a few other committees that were critical. When it was decided that those committees must now come together, get to exercise oversight, get to know what is cabinet planning around lockdown 5, and get to know what the implications of executing the work of the constitutional mandate will be like. And staff of committees came up, organized, got themselves to coordinate those meetings. Infrastructure such as ICT made sure that we get the licenses, Zoom licenses, Microsoft Teams to enable members to start engaging. There were practical things and they had to be done. That's why when you're head of this institution, when you're head of administration, I always say you straddle from strategy to making sure that there's food in the canteen, because the member will walk into the canteen and need some refreshment. So you never are not hands-on, you have to be hands-on. And in that way, I've always known that having to be a head of administration, you have to be hands-on. You can't sit in your office and a member asks you, why are the gates closed? And you say, no, member, I do not know. You have to say, member, oh yes, the gate in Lily Street is closed. However, go to Ruland. It is open. You have to say that. Or you have to say, oh, is your office locked? Oh, let me just check who can find you. I can't say to a member, oh no, and speak to so-and-so, Mr. So-and-so is responsible for that division. No, I have to say, no, member, just wait there. Definitely that door will be open. And that's the role of a head of administration. And in fact, when COVID came, we had to answer. I had to say, we have a residence doctor, we have the nurses, we're going to get them. And as things thawed, level 4, some members started coming onto the precinct, we were ready. We could at least link them up. We could make sure that they come into offices that are clean. We could say to them, look, we have the protocols as dictated by the NICD. We knew, and we had the infrastructure. And I must say that all colleagues in the very respective areas of support for members rose to the occasion. Yes, we did have challenges, we did have problems. However, all I could hear was just a resounding availability and willingness among staff to say, we have to get the ball rolling. You can't have a parliament that's stuck when now the whole country is stuck. Parliament has to step up because we are the protectors of the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Step up and make sure that the executive doesn't run ahead of us.
Absolutely.
And that's how those committees converged. And thereafter, we got used to it.
That's amazing. I think obviously this will be remembered. Children are asking, is this going to be written in the history books? And I always say, indeed, it will be written in the history book, and there will be a chapter as well under your leadership, how you steered the ship during a very difficult time in the history, not only of our country, but of the world as well. Just to touch on the space of the fourth IR, the fourth industrial revolution. How has Parliament been more effective if you measure just the reach and being able to do meetings in real time and also being able to engage the executive in real time instead of having members of the executive necessarily come into the precinct, into the building? Members were obviously able to connect from wherever they are around the country. What has been the shift like? And also just in terms of ensuring that accountability, that members are available, which one has been better? Would you say that the way the institution was before, pre the lockdown and post the lockdown, where would you say is the better space to advance oversight and accountability?
I guess I'll answer it in two ways. The demographics of the country have somehow put themselves in as a challenge. Whilst connectivity on virtual platforms has been convenient, somewhere because of our poor internet penetration, there's been challenges. But I must say, even that area, the members traversed it quite well. I always joke each time a member says, I can't connect, and then they call ICT. Say, no, it's not ICT, actually, it's because of where you are at. That's one.
Yes.
The one thing that has made things quite interesting is that work can happen wherever you are. You're right. The intensity of work and the volume of work has increased. It has brought with it stress, with at least the support. I know that some colleagues have had to work throughout 24 hours. Example is colleagues in communications, because they have to make sure that that message and that committee is flighted, whatever, whenever, and the number of committees. But the travel to some members has been an advantage, that they don't have to travel all the time. And I think the best ever thing that happened in COVID, irrespective of how horrible it's been, is the carbon footprint. If you woke up on level 4, you could breathe fresh air because there was less carbon print in there. But in terms of doing work and making sure that we exploit the two parameters, I think we are going to sit with what we now have gotten used to calling hybrid. We will never go back to having 1,000 people on the precinct. I don't think so. We'll never go back to having droves of members coming up and down. I don't think so. And I think we should adopt the technologies. We should look at 4IR, because 4IR is not about computers. It's about the way of doing business conveniently and using technologies wherever you are. That's how I understand it. And so that I can share with you, we sit in the SADC Innovation Hub. It's a team of the parliaments of SADC. I sit there with ICT managers, Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania, DRC, Namibia, Lesotho, Seychelles, Madagascar. I can't remember others. And it's coordinated by Zambia. And what those colleagues are doing, they're now looking at technologies such co-creation around e-voting, around a tracking tool, and the most important one is a translation. We in South Africa have the most challenging. In other countries, they have like the majority language and English. We have 11 languages, and we have that simultaneous translation and interpretation. So we're sitting almost like as challenged, but I must tell you, in that Innovation Hub, colleagues are sharing knowledge. They're also sharing experiences. They're also sharing capabilities of parliaments to say, how do we modernize our parliaments? So coming to your question of 4IR, parliaments, at least in SADC, have taken this, embraced it, and are now looking at innovation of modernizing parliaments. And that doesn't mean it's going to replace human beings necessarily. All tools and machines need a human being to upload some information. They don't just imagine their own. What it needs is either we improve our skills, those of us who are capable of being sophisticated, learning, it shows potential, that the type of skill we need now in parliament might be different, but it's different to the right direction. And to me, it also opens up opportunities to learn from other parliaments. And I must tell you, in June, I think June 13th of June somewhere, we are going on to a virtual conference of e-parliaments of the world under the International Parliamentary Union, IPU. And I'm excited that we really are getting a lot of information and knowledge from other parliaments, and we can only learn.
Absolutely.
And with us here, at least in Parliament, we have now had automated a lot of functions. One of those that we are going to automate, which links to our annual performance plan as Parliament, is we've automated our survey. Instead of contracting service providers that we used to do, we've automated it. We were introducing it to the NA Chief Whip and sharing with them that they will get this on their app as an app from Google, which got a questionnaire for them to complete on the satisfaction levels of the services that we are providing them as officials. So what do I do? What do I see? I see into the future a sophisticated workforce, a workforce that's agile, that is also open to opportunities, that wants to learn and get rid of the past movement of things, movement of papers by human beings and so on, but making sure that our work is really automated in the best manner possible. Most important, what we need to crack as officials of parliament, and you raised it earlier on, it's having tracking tools that looks at how we strengthen oversight from A to Z. And my discussion with some of my colleagues was, oversight is not only for members, it is also us as officials, creating tools that when a particular department comes here on a matter, we track it and make sure that it's sent wherever it has to be sent to, it's delivered upon, or there's a response, and an A to Z of a tracking tool. And to me, that is how we're going to be trying our best to modernize and automate. Example is this studio that was launched or established during COVID. And at least it's a platform where a lot of our members and leaders are really are getting the message out there without mediation.
Absolutely.
And I wish you guys a lot of luck.
Thank you very much.
Support
Thank you very much, ma'am. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the budget deficit. We know that the economy is
I was hoping you want to ask me about the budget deficit.
We know that the economy is shrinking, tax revenue is being reduced. We're sitting with a smaller budget. And if we're looking at these very exciting developments around the use of technology in the fourth IR space, as you beautifully articulated, Madam Acting Secretary, about how that has enabled Parliament, even during hard lockdown, to continue to do its work and to fulfill its constitutional mandate. Do we have a problem in terms of, because ultimately from where I look at it, I mean, you will have deeper insights in terms of how the budget is allocated across the institution to support the work of committees and members and so forth. Do we really have a challenge? I mean, if we're able to use the fourth IR space, shouldn't that then necessarily mean that obviously costs are reduced, because now we don't have to worry about logistics, members traveling, accommodation, hiring cars, and so forth? What is the perspective around the budget and this whole notion that we are working with a reduced budget and therefore it will hamper the ability of the institution, or in fact of the country, to function effectively? What's your perspective on that?
That's a good question. I think it's an irony indeed sometimes. Let me start by saying the budget reductions have been quite hard and harsh. And it's unfortunate that it's unthinkable that Parliament doesn't have its own process of appropriating its budget. In that, as a separate arm of state, it would have been useful that at the time the state of the fiscus is discussed, the executive authority, that is the chairperson and the Speaker of the National Assembly, are engaged at that level where Parliament can then say, yes, there is an economic shrinkage. Yes, there is this epidemic that we never planned for. Yes, the country's growth hasn't been so spectacular like we had thought. FDIs have shrunk. However, for us to exercise effective oversight, this is what it will cost us. And I know that there is a greater attempt to get to that level. Because naturally, when you talk about the budget of Parliament, it should be separately discussed before the whole government wheel of the budget cycle starts, meaning that there has to be a conversation between the head of state, the Minister of Finance, and all other fiscal institutions operating. And then, of course, the taxes that are collected, because we don't collect taxes. And I always say to colleagues, we don't collect taxes. Unfortunately, we take from the same fiscus. We don't have a separate, but the conversations must be around what will it cost? What is the budget of Parliament with respect to effective oversight, public participation, lawmaking? But this assumes that we are ready as administrators. We've costed the program or the whole strategy of 5 years to say in the first year, this is what will be entailed in an oversight plan. This is what will be entailed in the public participation plan. And this is what members would like to do, at least in the first year. We know that the environment of politics changes all the time, but at least we can plan. So coming back to the person, what then happens, unfortunately? The National Treasury looks at how they must raise the country's economy to address the debt, and so that we address the deficit between the GDP and debt. So they will say, of course, like now, we need to reduce 10% across. And the focus of reducing that 10% is on compensation. So by the time we get that conversation, say, no, you can't just do compensation. By the time we start talking to the officials, the horse is bolted. So we always come almost like right at the end. What's the implication? The implication is currently we're sitting with a budget that's reduced along the incorrect lines in compensation. And remember, the work of Parliament is driven by at least one bodies, largely. And in fact, if it was a discussion, which we started doing, is to say, where do you reduce and how do you reduce? You can't just focus on compensation. That's an area that we stuck with. In the next MTF, in this financial year, we're going to have a reduction of 257 million. Okay. And the next other year, it's going to be another 295 million. And then outside year, it's going to be a good 300 million.
And what is the impact thereof, Madam?
This is the impact. What it means is tomorrow, it is likely that Parliament will have to go and ask for an overdraft to just maintain the current salary bill. But I'm confident, let me put it, I'm confident that we will not get to that point. We will be able to sustain the current workforce before anybody gets impacted on, like Denel. I mean, you wake up today, Denel has negotiated with its staff that they will be paid 20% of their salary across board. It means from the CEO down to whoever, primarily because there's no compensation money. There's no money for wages. So we will not come to that point at all. Why am I saying so? At least, like you were saying, there's been savings. What we need to do now is make sure that we pay those colleagues who are on our payroll in the manner that we paid it, sustain that. However, there is going to be still a plan to invest in things like your automation and so on. But I've always said to colleagues, remember, when you automate and you do modernization of infrastructure, you don't do it now and pay now. You plan. So over time, we will be able to, it means we must use our retained funds wisely. We mustn't use them for immediate gratification. We must use our retained funds quite strategically to maintain the modernization, automate, support the business of Parliament. Yes, deal with the notion, this whole compensation problem. But I must say, we didn't sit there and just sat there like feeling pity for ourselves. What we did, we also looked at, yes, there's a big compensation budget. What do we do with it? We're trying to also address the aging staff of Parliament. And I must say that there are a few of us who are willing to look at this whole pack that we call voluntary retirement. I want to be clear. It is not retrenchment.
Yes.
It is voluntary retirement. And this is not a new thing of baby Jawa. Our organized labor has had communications with persons who are saying, if you introduce this in a manner that explains the benefits, the challenges, and the risks, and you give us correct information, we can consider that. And we're trying to put in graduate programs. So we're trying to balance that, trying to say our resources, if we have access, we'll invest in infrastructure. However, priority now is to maintain at least the wage bill so that we actually pay people's salaries and not be like dinner. But third to that, strategically take any other thing that's in excess, reinvest it into making sure that our members fulfill their constitutional mandate. And we have the right skills and the right people in the right positions to make sure that our staff also is, what can I say, modernized, and they've got better skills, they compete well.
That's a very comprehensive overview, Madam Secretary, that you've given around the challenges with the budget. But when we reflect on Parliament as the legislative sector, as one of the three arms of state, has Parliament asserted itself effectively within that space, within the budget space? And you talk rightfully about how the budget is appropriated and how there hasn't been a mechanism. And obviously, under your leadership, you have come to understand that there hasn't been a mechanism. And the way the process is structured, it, so to speak, excludes one of the key, one of the three arms of state, and the authority that is vested, the constitutional authority and the power that is vested in Parliament. Has Parliament used the systems at the power at its disposal to assert itself appropriately in order to ensure that it gets what is due to it from the budget?
Yeah, and that's quite interesting. I mean, there's been quite a lot of conversation around it, but I must tell you, since at least we started this discussion between ourselves and our executive authority and the Minister of Finance, we've been able to get regular meetings. We had a meeting in December where, in fact, the minister acknowledged that first and foremost, the budget baseline of Parliament must be refined. And second to that, there has to be a meeting, a sit-down meeting. My last conversation with that office is that there's a commitment from at least the Minister of Finance. The President, head of state is clear. That must happen. Parliament must be funded properly. But it also has to present how and why must it be funded properly and what has happened in the past. So he's clear. The head of state is clear. The Minister of Finance is committed. In terms of our FMPPLA, for every adjustment to budget Parliament, there must be a consultation with the head of Parliament, and this is the executive authority. And I must tell you now, good story. There is a scheduled meeting just before the cycle of budgeting starts around August, and this is where this conversation will prevail. But what then the acting accounting officer and her administration must do is properly do an analysis of what does it cost a Parliament to ensure effective oversight, effective legislation making, effective public participation. It means we must not, it's not slogans. We must make sure that we do that analysis of our budget and how it's been allocated in those areas. So we need to be sophisticated and empower our executive authority. So when they present, they're able to say, we need this, and out of the fiscus, we need a good 3%. It's not top slicing, but that's how a democracy, a constitutional democracy, must be supported.
Madam Secretary, just in conclusion, that's the last question. What can we expect? I mean, we know there's been a lot of talk today about Parliament's budget vote and how strategic it is in terms of conducting oversight, ensuring that all the undertakings that have been made by the President in his SONA are implemented. What can we expect from the Ncop and SONA budget vote 2? Discussions.
We have given inputs to our principals. We've said one of the things that are important is that Parliament has had 5 clean audits, and that's critical. 5 clean audits, it's so mean play. You know, it's an important important milestones that we've attained. So meaning that at least the little that we get goes to the right places. Our irregular expenditure is almost zero. And both the leadership of these 2 houses are going to definitely discuss how the shrinkage, appreciating the country's position, appreciating the world's global economic meltdown, appreciating the impact COVID has had on systems, on people, on families, but acknowledging that we're going into the space with a reduced budget. First thing is we have to be very, shall I say, scrupulous, very focused on the little that we have and how we use it. And in fact, where we must sacrifice, yes, we can sacrifice, We've done no international visits. We can sacrifice around things like printing. Actually, it might be insignificant, but we've reduced it. So they're going to look at the internal savings. But however, they're going to pitch it to say Parliament has to take its rightful role in defining and deciding and allocating its budget in line with its strategy. Absolutely. Irrespective of what is happening. We're not saying, I don't think my principals will say, give us money tomorrow. They're not irrational. They're in South Africa. We know what is happening. They're going to argue for the role that Parliament has had to assume and take up to dictate its own budget to ensure that the constitutional democracy in this country is successful. Otherwise, we're going to have a weak parliament going forward.
Absolutely. Madam Acting Secretary, unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it for now, but I cannot conclude this discussion without saying it is the 1st of June today and it's Youth Month. And we must also acknowledge those who came before us and yourself as a veteran of the 1976 youth who was so pioneering. Let's just say that we acknowledge you, we acknowledge your leadership even as a woman. When it comes to issues of gender transformation, you as a woman, the first woman to lead this institution, we're giving you all the accolades that are due to you in saying that you have made history in terms of pioneering or steering the ship during a very historical time in the history of our country.
Thank you so much. That was my birthday. It was yesterday.
Oh, happy belated birthday.
It's a beautiful message for my birthday.
Oh,
Thank
wonderful,
you so much for
wonderful.
all of this. And thanks for the interview. It's been wonderful.
Wonderful,
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. That was the Acting Secretary to Parliament, Mayor Penelope Baby Chawa, who's just shared some insights into Parliament's priorities for this financial year, and we can expect and what we can expect from Parliament's budget vote a little bit later. Let's take a look at this insert. Stay with us.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. This year marks 45 years since the June 1976 Students' Uprising, in which many children lost their lives while standing up against the cruel apartheid system, which imposed compulsory introduction of Afrikaans as a language of tuition. South Africa's Youth Month honors these brave and courageous youth who laid down their lives fighting for social justice, equality, and freedom. The month also recognizes the role of the youth of today in deepening our hard-won democracy, protecting freedoms attained, and advancing socio-economic transformation. As the national legislative authority, Parliament continues to ensure the government of the people under the Constitution by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues, passing legislation, and overseeing executive action to ensure that we accelerate change to radically better the quality of life of all South Africans, including the youth. As we commemorate Youth Day on 16 June, let us engage in deep reflection, dialogue, and action to bring about meaningful and long-lasting solutions to challenges facing our young population. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Parliament consists of two houses, namely the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. The role of the National Assembly. The National Assembly has a constitutional mandate to make laws. One of the main functions of the National Assembly is to make the laws by which our country is governed. It does this by referring bills to committees for processing and debating those bills. The House can approve, reject, or refer bills back to committees for further discussion. The National Assembly also has a constitutional mandate to carry out oversight on the executive. Oversight is carried out by scrutinizing, monitoring, and overseeing the actions of the government or any other organ of state in respect of the implementation of the laws, the application of the budget, and observance of the Constitution. Furthermore, the National Assembly keeps the executive accountable by approving budgets, through asking parliamentary questions, having parliamentary debates about the important issues, and by proposing and voting on motions relating to the work of government.
I also understand the responsibilities of public representatives. I further understand the responsibility of Parliament as a site for debate, for public education, and as a defender of all law, rights, and liberties. I also understand the role of the presiding officers as enablers of debate and protectors of the rights of the public and the public representative to hold the executive to account and to capacitate themselves, these public representatives in this House, to adequately use the power of the purse strings to hold and to continue holding the executive to account.
The National Assembly also has a constitutional mandate to elect the president from amongst its members.
And I accordingly declare the Honorable Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa duly elected President of the Republic of South Africa.
Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Here on channel 408, and this is our build-up show to Parliament's budget vote debates taking place both in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. COVID-19 continues to disrupt our lives and ways of doing business across the globe. Parliament is also affected and was forced to change the way it conducts its business, which includes virtual and hybrid settings. And you will see tonight, this afternoon, as both houses sit to debate the budget votes in both in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. But now I am joined in studio by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. I had to get it right. The Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lichisa Tsinoli. Sir, good afternoon and welcome to our program.
Good afternoon, Dati. And good afternoon to your viewers and listeners.
Thank you very much. Let's start off by providing context in terms of the budget debates that are taking place today. Earlier in the year, during the State of the Nation, the President outlined government priorities, and then the Minister of Finance came in and announced his budget allocation for those key government priorities. And then the budget vote processes, rather the whole budget process followed. And now today we are sitting in the National Assembly at 2 and in the National Council of Provinces, and there is a debate on vote 2. Can you take us through that process in terms of your responsibility as the National Assembly?
Firstly, Parliament and how it works continues to be a work in progress. And this is an important point to make because some of the legislative framework within which we are doing this work some of it has been there before, some has come around not so long ago. The Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act is a recent legislation. But in addition to that, and linked to it, is the requirement for Parliament to form a treasury section so that it manages the finances of Parliament. We haven't as yet done it, but it's part of the requirement of the new legislation. And this is because Parliament, as an arm of the state, is expected to receive its money, and it decides how and where it spends that money in order to achieve the reason for its existence. Oversight over the executive, but also public engagement and participation, ensuring that people are involved in the decision-making of the policies we adopt, legislation we introduce, and often the amendments that often arises as a result of that dynamic relationship with the people, especially those who are affected by the legislation that we introduce, for example, and the resources that we allocate. So our budget is a reflection of financing those activities of Parliament that are relevant to its mandate, as I have just said, partly.
That's very interesting. But what is the significance of the budget process, this particular budget process, in policy implementation, particularly now in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, the significance is that there is accountability that is built in the manner in which Parliament works, generally speaking. Itself, it needs to account for the public resources it receives, as to how we have used this money and in what way it has been used. This is why we now have a joint standing committee on Parliament. In order to call the executive of Parliament, the Speaker and the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, to account for how the resources allocated to Parliament is being used, whether it is fulfilling the reason for its existence and its relationship with the work it does, with the resources it has received. So in a sense, that, like Parliament itself, holds individual departments to account for what plans it has. That process took place ahead of, for example, for Parliament today, there were interactions with the Joint Standing Committee on Parliaments to hear from the officials and the political leadership to explain that. Now, that process was also happening transparently in public. But this is the final steps that we are taking now to come to the public for the House to approve the proposed allocation of resources in various parts of the work of Parliament.
The minister announced budget reductions across the board. How is Parliament affected? And also, does that talk to the funding model of Parliament as another arm of state?
Yeah.
It would seem
Yes.
Parliament is being funded more like other government departments that it has to hold to account, including the Treasury
Itself.
Yeah. So how does that affect?
Part of the reason I call this a work in progress is that Parliament has not worked at the speed, in my personal opinion, it ought to have done, in order to ensure that the understanding that we are an arm of state should translate into the style of managing the budget allocation to Parliament and the carrying out of its function. And although I called it my personal opinion, this is a view that we have held in the presiding officer echelons of the institution, to engage with the executive in Treasury. We did so in the past with previous ministers, but also it involves the president as well, to communicate that the Money Bills and Related Matters Act, which creates the necessity for the financial management of Parliament and provincial legislatures partly, requires that Parliament be funded in a particular manner. We cannot continue to be treated as a department, and that the quantum of what we get allocated should also reflect that reality. But that's work in progress, like I said. Previously, the head of state, the president in his capacity as head of state, has been engaged to talk about the mandate that he needs that he is leading overall on the state, so that there is appreciation of these factors that I'm pointing out, so that the allocations that are made to Parliament are appropriate to its tasks. So the question you pose about how Parliament has been affected, it's not nice. Let me put it that way, because there are certain, and this would be the same across a number of departments as well. And we think that there's a different way in which in future such things must be done, if they must be done appropriately and so on. So that there is an appreciation that Parliament itself, not operating outside of the overall fiscal environment, cannot itself do. So that decision about where and what we do should come from us, should not come outside of us from the executive. We should determine the areas, because it is absolutely crucial that our budget and where it goes should be in line with the strategic areas of focus that strengthens our ability to hold the executive to account. For example, let me illustrate this point. The money available to committees of Parliament is not often adequate for them to be able to do thorough interventions to determine in precise terms what's happening, where is it happening, to follow through, to investigate, to get to find other experiences that inform the work that committees do. But this is something that is in the conversation that we are having with the presidency and with the treasury. That funding that work is critical, so that we are able to follow every rand and cent that is spent in the public sector at least, but also in the public sector and its relationship with the private sector, that it is appropriate, that we are not taken for, we are not being skimmed in our relationship with others in a way that is unacceptable. So the work that committees should do needs to be funded for that reason, so that we can make better impact. Some of the improvements that are necessary to do what the public demands of us. The public generally and the media has also been on this case, appropriately so, that we must improve the quality of the impact we are making and be seen to be responsive to what we are spotting, what we are noticing that perhaps could be done differently and better, but also others should be stopped dead in their tracks if they are outside of the boundaries of ethical conduct and integrity practice.
Very interesting, because when we look at the developments that came out of from the Zondo Commission, we've had the previous presiding officers of Parliament admitting to the fact that Parliament was not able to do oversight as expected in some instances. Could you attribute that to these budget deficits that Parliament always has to work within? And also, how do I put it? The existing oversight protocols that Parliament has, are we able to enhance them with the current budget that we have?
Well, I think the budget issue is an important one and clearly critical to the performance of the functions that we are referring to. But they can't entirely, in their entirety, explain why certain things were not done. So I don't think we should make that mistake of assuming that we could use that as an explanation for why certain things were not properly done. There are things within the limited resources we have that could have been done differently. There's no question about it. And those did not necessarily need finances, okay? So it's an important point, because often we would be misunderstood to suggest that the limitation of finances necessarily do. They are a factor, they do contribute. If you are unable to go to places to examine what's happening and so on, to depend only on third parties. Third parties are important, such as the so-called fourth sector, the media, is very critical to the process. But members of Parliament, to be able to do their in our work in our constituencies, for example. My constituency is in Botshabelo. We had a recent visit by the Deputy Minister from Trade and Industry with a team of their officials to look at the industrial park there, whether the way the system is being managed, the park itself is conducive to doing the objective for which they have been designated as industrial parks, and the new interesting initiatives such as the digital hub that's located there is actually responding to the kind of needs in that community and so on. So such interventions require our, when they do happen, we must be able to verify that indeed they are making the impact that they did. The Deputy Minister came there to speak to and respond to questions that were raised about what is actually happening, what is actually the department plans and budget and allocations, and why are they happening this way and so on. So it was a very useful, informative exercise. And what I'm saying about that is that we committees need to be able to do that work. Often we are only able to do it as individual, often a small group of 2 or 3 MPs coming together because we come from the same portfolio committee. What's his name? The chair of the Social Development Portfolio Committee, under COVID, with another member, went to the department itself, physically in the building, to go for oversight purposes, to interact with the officials there and other players and so on. So we want our members of Parliament to have the flexibility to be able to do those kind of things and visit and so on, so that we are aware things are happening. We don't only operate through reports and so on. You know, let me put it bluntly, reports can often be cooked, and we would like to verify them. The majority of them are part reflection of reality, but sometimes there's exaggeration, there's understatement, there's misstatement, there is omission. And only concrete reality and interaction with what's happening, where things are happening, that the difference can be made by our intervention. So the extent to which the resources we get enable us to do that is crucial, absolutely critical.
Very crucial. And the COVID-19 pandemic has, in a way, pushed Parliament to delve much quicker into the fourth industrial revolution. We see a lot of oversight done virtually. We've seen a lot of committee meetings and even sittings of both the NA and the Ncop happening on hybrid and on the virtual platform.
Yes.
One would argue that with those kind of technological interventions, these budget reductions shouldn't necessarily affect Parliament that much, because the cost of traveling, for instance, would have been reduced in a way. Would you think that claim is justifiable?
Well, you see, it is true that traveling and accommodation and meals and transportation that often has to be incurred when MPs travel has been the result of COVID. Okay. But it doesn't explain and cannot be substituted by online interaction. It doesn't effectively do that. All that it means is that as MPs, we can hold our meetings, including with the ministry and officials and so on. But this is virtual meetings, okay? They are very different from when we can have those meetings and also go into the area and talk to workers on the plant, at the factory that produces PPE, and see the actual things and so on the ground. So virtual meetings are crucial, and this is where the world is going to, but they do not substitute the necessity for on the ground interaction and effective management. My sense is that we must not be too, celebrate too much the cost saved by COVID and its impact. What we must celebrate very clearly is that what this has done is that by working virtually, it has a disadvantage and advantages. What has been good, for example, has been for the fact that we can have a meeting in the morning, as we often have to do, and finish by 12 or by 1 o'clock before lunch, and go into a meeting in the constituency, or go and visit a place there with my mask on, or attend another meeting internationally now, okay, elsewhere and so on. So that's been the advantage. It means there are things that we can do that we wouldn't be able to have done. We would have had to travel there and so on. But there are those that we are not able to do as a result of not being able to travel.
Are we likely to see these arrangements staying on post COVID-19?
Well, many of the meetings, I hope, can remain virtual. It's a brilliant one. Now, speaking on behalf of the community of Parliament, working at home has been a big relief for people who spend most of their time away because of work-related commitments from their families and so on. So partly it's been good that you can work online at home for a variety of things most of the time, even if you still have to travel to a meeting there a brief meeting there or something like that, but you are basically, your base of operations is home. So you are close to where you should be socially. It's a very important thing for MPs across, I would imagine, the country.
I want to release you now so that you can go join the house, but I can't let you go before I ask this. The position of the Secretary to Parliament has been vacant for quite some time now. Are they...
It's a very unfortunate thing that things have developed at the pace of a village cow. I often say this, and I know there are some people who don't like me speaking ill of village cows, but look, we could have done this faster, but we have not, unfortunately, been able to do so. Interviews were held, and unfortunately, the people who were most available, who made it, so to speak, were unavailable for other factors that we had no control over. And so it means we must relook at the process to ensure that we finalize the filling in of the position. It is critical that the head of administration must be in place, because that is crucial to the rest of the 1,300 staff members and their relationship with the political leadership of Parliament, that we have that position and other similarly strategic position, such as the CFO and so on, filled up and so on. I want to answer a question I know you have about, for example, that, people, if you don't brush their back, they don't feel okay. That Parliament has gotten clean audits a number of times in succession.
For the past 3 years in succession, for instance.
And you got a little award from the late Kimi Magwetu in appreciation of that. But you must also say that we lost a head of internal audit here, highly qualified and experienced person who contributed towards building that capacity inside the institution. Okay, now I'm being political there. We let him go, and we shouldn't have let him go, but he's gone to Nelson Mandela University, and that's their benefit from our laws. So we are going to be closing those gaps. They are critical and strategic inside the institution.
You let him go, and I'll let you go to the house.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Speak of the National Assembly, Mr. Lechisa Tsinoli. Shortly after this, we'll be joined by the presiding officer in the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Sylvia Lucas. Let's take a look at this.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Parliament consists of two houses, namely the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. The role of the National Council of Provinces. The NCOP is constitutionally mandated to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government. This is done through participation in the national legislative process and by providing a national forum for consideration of issues affecting provinces.
Let us remind ourselves of the words of President Nelson Mandela when he said, quote, "The NCOP is uniquely placed to reflect the diversity of our society and to synthesize the experience of those spheres of government charged with the great bulk of the task of implementing the country's national program of fundamental change," close quote.
The NCOP also plays a unique role in the promotion of the principles of cooperative government and intergovernmental relations. It ensures that the three spheres of government work together in performing their unique functions in terms of the Constitution, and that in doing so, they do not encroach in each other's areas of competence.
We believe that this is a very important house, the NCOP. We believe that we should continue to work together as provinces to raise issues that affect our respective provinces.
Out of the main functions of the NCOP is to make laws. In performing this legislative function, the NCOP may consider, pass, amend, propose amendments, or reject any legislation before it.
Members of the NCOP, in the context of the dedicated and committed collectives and a galaxy of leaders, we pledge to serve all our people. We'll do so irrespective of class, color, gender, religion, environmental, or any other form of discrimination.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
8. National Council of Provinces is responsible for ensuring the interests of provinces are taken into account in government. NCOP plays a unique role in ensuring that the three spheres of government work together to achieve their unique objectives without encroaching in each other's jurisdiction. We are now joined by Ms. Sylvia Lucas to talk to us about among others, the role of the NCOP in the budget process and how the NCOP addresses the issue of oversight. She joins us on the Zoom platform. Ms. Lucas, good afternoon and welcome to Parliament TV.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon also to your viewers, and thank you very much for having us.
It is indeed a pleasure to have you. Let us start off. What is the role of the NCOP and processing of the budget, like in the NCOP generally?
First of all, there is no legislation usually that is complete without the process of the National Council of Provinces being concluded. All of the legislation usually is tabled in both the National Assembly and in the National Council of Provinces. But the National Council of Provinces, as the upper house of Parliament, is actually ratifying and confirming the specific legislation with regards to particularly the budget that is there, the kind of processes that is being followed. NCOP also have particularly in terms of its composition, have the kind of forum and structures that is actually enabling it to make sure that we have the participation of provincial as well as local government. So in terms of the division of revenue bill, that is the one that is allocating resources or finances to the different spheres of government. The NCOP have the specific role to make sure that provinces as well as local government, particularly through our public participation, participate in the whole process, but it's also the house where provinces, particularly provinces and organized local government, as a representative of the local sphere of government, can actually participate in the whole process by getting the mandates, what they call mandates, to vote for or against the budget or areas of the budget. So that is the role that the National Council of Provinces are playing, particularly since we are the house where all three spheres of government is usually coming together to make sure that we address the issues of national, provincial, and local sphere of government. So I hope I have actually put it very clearly as to what our role is, because even as we speak today, the committee have tabled their report, and it has been debated within the National Council of Provinces, and then provinces got then an opportunity to make their inputs with regards to whether they are supporting or they are not supporting the specific legislation.
Yes, talking of provinces and the local government sphere, Parliament has committed to ensure that it undertakes better oversight through deeper scrutiny and more effective involvement, and ultimately more effective recommendations. How will the NCOP give effect to this undertaking in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Fortunately, throughout what was now the lockdown, I think it was when it was in alert level 4, the NCOP actually started to assert itself with regards to the issues of making sure that through virtual and where needed, particularly later in the alert levels of the lockdown, make sure that there is physical engagement and physical involvement with not only departments, but also other spheres of government, to make sure that in terms of the oversight role that we are supposed to be playing, we assert ourselves to make sure that we are able to not only virtually, particularly during the time of the pandemic, but also physically do more to make sure that we enhance our oversight responsibility. Through our programs, what we have started to do, and I believe it is something that we have now implemented in the 6th Parliament, is that we started to call ministers as well as provinces, particularly throughout the time of the pandemic, to come and account to the NCOP with regards to what their plans and programs are to mitigate the impacts of this pandemic, but also to make sure that through their plans and programs, they implement the areas of commitment. And we have also made sure that in terms of executive undertakings, we have requested that committees should make sure that they keep executive members more accountable to the issues that they have committed to. So I think we have been doing very well. If you can go into the programs of the reports of the NCOP with regards to how we have been handling our oversight affairs, how we have been handling public participation, how generally we have made sure that our committees are very functional. You will find that throughout, we didn't have a record of less than 96 to 99% of achievement of what we wanted to achieve, even with regards to sectoral issues and even with regards to commemorative days in the South African calendar. Throughout, we have utilized the virtual platforms very effectively, but some of the committees even still continue to do physical oversight. And even in our provincial week, many of our MPs from the National Council of Provinces that were sent back to their provinces, they literally went down physically to some of the areas where they are supposed to make sure that if at all there was a commitment, there was a budget, to make sure that there is progress with regard to implementation. So although in a more nuanced way and although in a different way, but we have been able successfully so to continue to deepen our understanding, but also to deepen our role in making sure that oversight does take place.
Deputy Chair, before I let you go, lastly, there have been a lot of limitations in terms of the pandemic itself and the budget reductions that were announced by the Minister of Finance. How will the NCOP committees measure the impact of its oversight work and the report back to communities within these limitations of the budget reduction and the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think I must give you an example of a program that we had as the NCOP, that we led this program on behalf of Parliament. And I will speak about it all the time because we did it within a very low budget, but very efficient, very effectively. And we actually succeeded in making sure that we involve the whole country. And that is when we decided to do the review of the Women's Charter. And within that review of the Women's Charter, we went further to do a law reform summit. We went further to do an economic summit where we actually started to assess with regards to women and with regards to the articles around economy within the Women's Charter, what we have achieved. I can say that there was less. Sorry.
Indeed, Deputy Chair, I know you are preparing now to go into the sitting, and we'll have to leave it there for now. But thank you very much for joining us. That was the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Sylvia Lucas, talking to us about Parliament Budget Vote 2 of Parliament. Stay tuned to Parliament TV as we build up to the sitting taking place like shortly at around 2 o'clock. Let's take a look at this.
Thank you.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408. We're now joined by Dr. Jantjies, who is the director of the PBO, to better contextualize and to reflect on Budget Vote 2 for us. Dr. Jantjies, welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's just to start off our conversation, this very important conversation that we're about to embark on. Just talk to us about the mandate of the PBO.
Parliamentary Budget Office was established by Parliament as a specifically focusing on providing technical analysis to Parliament during the fiscal oversight. In a way, our role is to provide the insight in terms of macroeconomic policy, fiscal policy, but in support of the role of the parliament in holding government to account on the use of budget. In a nutshell, that's what PBO does.
Wonderful. Now, when we're talking about the focus of the PBO, particularly on the finance and the appropriations committees, we know that essentially that is where your focus is, but how do you ensure that you expand support or extend support to the rest of the committees in Parliament?
I think one of the main vision that we set out ourselves for the next couple of years is to really ensure that our oversight, our insight analysis, does look into the broader functions of government as a whole, to say what are some of the changes or what are some of the lack of changes brought about in society and the economy by the budgets. And by doing that, we touch on all functions of government. So when you provide analysis to Appropriations Committee in particular, we say this is some of the development in education, development indicators, or in healthcare, or in economic development matters. So in a way, it does cover a wide spectrum of service delivery in our analysis, even though we don't specifically focus on specific functions of government. But when need arises, we do engage with individual committees to provide analysis in their consideration in this regard.
Now, when it comes to the current context, the COVID-19 context, we know that there's a huge budget deficit. We know that the budget obviously is reduced. What is available for government to actually spend is much less than it was before. What kind of insights have you given to Parliament in relation to ensuring that with this reduced budget, that government is still able to perform its functions, its constitutional mandate, and Parliament in particular is still able to perform its constitutional mandate as well?
I think what we did in our analysis, even earlier in June 2020, we did try to show an international trend in terms of how other countries have actually been able to advise, how other legislatures or countries generally have been able to deal with the COVID-19 impact, in particular, protecting societies, protecting their economies. In our analysis, have shown that other countries, many countries have actually expanded their expenditure, more so in vulnerable areas, providing more spending in healthcare to ensure that there's a better equipment to healthcare facilities, but also there's better provision of food and safety to vulnerable communities, societies. But I think in our analysis, we did try to show that there's a trend that is coming out. And as South Africa, we need to, in a way, be part of the trend whereby instead of cutting expenditure in more vulnerable society in more vulnerable areas, let's rather expand expenditure. And you've seen that government's approach was more about reprioritization of expenditure from certain area to other areas to protect those vulnerable communities. And of course, that has led to more wider discussion in Parliament, in the committees of finance and appropriation, in terms of how does oversight expand in a way that it leads to more reconstruction of the economy to ensure that the economy grow again as it was before the COVID-19. So our analysis really focused largely on those areas to ensure that what is the intentional trend and what areas we ought to do in South Africa as well in that regard.
Bearing in mind, Dr. Jantjies, that South Africa was already in a tactical recession before the pandemic hit. How does the PBO ensure, the Parliamentary Budget Office ensure that the budget that is available can actually begin to do structured or targeted oversight in such a manner that even at a cascaded level, at provincial level and at a district level, we can begin to see economic activity? What kind of analysis and insights do you provide, and particularly within the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still unfolding? What kind of insights can you give, or have you given to Parliament, or will you continue to give throughout the current financial year to ensure that all of those, the key priorities that the President is focusing the country on, that they actually aggressively implemented?
I think first and foremost, some of the economic approach that are taken by different countries, some have been contested, some have been, discussion around it. But I think what we have tried to emphasizing a lot is try to say to Parliament, one of the there's two options often you take in a crisis like this. Either you expand government expenditure in areas that will lead to more growth or you can choose to contract the spending of government, which will lead to less growth and so on. So I think that's been our message. Look, rather expand the spending in this area to ensure that you continue to sustain economic activities in the country, but also ensure that we can have sustainability in our public finances. But I think one of the issues that came up with the COVID-19, it's precisely that it's exposed our country, society, the inequalities that are there in place, and in our analysis, we're trying to show some of those inequalities or that were exaggerated by the COVID-19 and how the proposals on budgets are going to either help or even make them worse off. We've shown in our analysis in that regard. But I think zooming back to the parliament's budget itself, I think one of the points that came up strongly and has been there over the years, the issue of public participation in the budget process itself. And I've heard the conversation a lot of times over the months that the issue of public be able to participate in budget process in parliament is a very important area.
Absolutely.
And I think particularly ensuring that it's more inclusive. But with the COVID-19 now, we move into virtual working. It means there will remain those who will be excluded in the process of public participation. And how do we make sure that we protect that space of public participation in the budget process, but also more inclusive, making sure that the public participation is inclusive. So also some of the things that I've highlighted in our analysis support the process oversight.
Indeed. Let's talk a little bit more about how the Parliamentary Budget Office ensures that with the insights that you give, the perspectives that you share, and the advice that you give to Parliament's Finance and Appropriations Committees, that you also take into consideration all the unique challenges that are, that find expression across the 9 provinces. As we know, each province has got its own challenges, and even at a district level, districts are very different. So do you take that kind of analysis or that kind of information or that intelligence into consideration? Do you look at, for example, all of the data that comes from Stats SA and I? We're also aware with, for example, with all of the public participation processes that the Deputy Chairperson and the Deputy Speaker have undertaken through the Women's Charter Review, that Stats SA doesn't always have provincial level or localized level data. So how do you then ensure that the budget is not only approached, the advice that you give, it doesn't only look at a national perspective, but it can actually be cascaded, or it can be shaped in such a way that it can touch the lives of ordinary South Africans, not only at a provincial level, at a district level, and a localized level as well?
What we have done, when we look at the recent developmental indicators published by Stats SA, as you mentioned, in December last year, they actually did try to decompose the data to provide for provincial elements there, also trying to district. So what we did is that we, in our analysis for division of revenue and appropriations level, we did.
Dr. Jantjies, we will have to leave it there for now. And my apologies to interrupt you, but we will continue this conversation after the NCOP and National Assembly's budget vote, which is now taking place at 1400 hours. Let's take a look. Yeah. Awesome.